In order for us to utilise imagery for in-field variable rate applications, there are a number of actions we must endure prior to creating our plans. One of those steps relates to our cropping. If not already input, the cropping provides the background of information we need to ensure we are feeding the crop accordingly whilst also adhering to industry compliance and farmers' best practice. To ensure the cropping is correct, click on the Fields tab. Inside the Fields tab, select your field either from the list or via the map, which in turn highlights the said field. Hover over the field name and click the pencil to edit the crop. In here, enter your crop by starting to type the crop into the crop box. Select your crop. Enter your variety. This becomes important as malting, feed and milling varieties are all fed differently. Enter your target yield. This is normally populated to that of the standard. Once we have our cropping input, we need to ensure the imagery available to us is collected from the relevant farming blocks. We do this by clicking on the map layers icon, the imagery tab here, and down here in the setup boundaries. In here we would select your fields. We would click save to start collecting data for those fields. If you haven't already done this, then unlocking the imagery and assigning it to your holding could take up to 24 hours. So be prepared to have to return again to create and utilize your imagery. Once we have assigned the imagery to the correct farm holding, we can start to download and look at our collected imagery. Firstly, I need to click on Map Layers and then onto Imagery. We can filter down our crops and holdings if needs be using the filter and icon at the top right. In this instance, I'm going to filter by a crop. Now that that is filtered by a crop, we can then start to upload the imagery. The imagery dates are seen down here at the bottom of the screen, but also its format can be selected using this tab here. For most variable rate applications, we would need the raw data biomass imagery, which is classed as NDVI. Once you can see the imagery, we merely in this screen sense check the imagery to ensure no straight line trends. These can indicate man-made issues in field, be it a change of crop, field margins, or even soil reflectance. Once the imagery has been checked, we need to move through to the Nutrition tab. Prior to creating our plans, we need to calculate the crop's requirements. This is done based on the cropping we input earlier and calculated based on the offtake and yield. Requirements will be based generally on the RB209 crop offtake unless soil analysis is available. If we click on the Nutrition tab, click Calculate from the headings across the top of the screen, we can then select our fields to build nutrient plans for. Click Calculate to continue. Once calculated, each field should have its own indicator showing the crop's requirements. I particularly like this aspect of the platform, as once plans are created, they are automatically deducted and therefore then show the balance required moving forwards. It's also good and useful to know that stocks of manures, slurries, sludge and digestate all deduct from the initial requirements in the same manner. Now that we have our cropping and nutrition populated, we can now move to plan and create our variable rate paths. Under the nutrient icon, click on Create a Plan. We need to name the plan. I find usually crop, product and rate, and maybe even a split that you're planning works really well. especially if returning to audit records or print said plans off. Click on Add Fields to the plan. In here, the box allows us the ability to either filter our fields based on our inputted cropping, or for us to just in general click on a field to add to the plan. Once your fields are assigned to your plan, click Close here. Click on the Biomass tab next to the fields here, and then tick this box, Use biomass layers to calculate applications. Moving across to the top right of our screen, we can then click Add Application. We need to input the product. This can be done generally by typing the product in, as most, if not all, of the manufactured end products are already live and available in Omnia. If there isn't one available, please let us know and we will look to add that product in. Manures, slurries and sludge are added via the stocks icon. So we need to choose our product and then enter the desired application date. This unlocks further parameters for our application. The OmniaHub has two modes available to us. The manual mode allows us to override the system parameters for both the low and the higher biomass, meaning that we can set the floor and the ceiling of our application by product in kilograms per hectare, or as in nutrient kilograms per hectare, as we can see here, nutrient or product. The automatic mode, our options support placing higher nitrogen rates across the lower biomass areas and reducing our application rates across the higher biomass to achieve our target application as an average across the whole field. Therefore, not using any more or not using any less than we would normally when we're spreading at a flat rate. It's good to note here that the automatic mode also can be flipped so that we can utilize higher nitrogen rates across the higher biomass areas and lower nitrogen rates across the low biomass areas. This personally though I would use towards the back end of the season to push for yield and to also promote proteins for such crops as milling wheats. Once we have selected our desired mode, we can then move to type in our proposed application rate. In this instance, I will use kilograms per hectare of nutrient required. This subsequently populates the kilograms per hectare of product and vice versa. Once the application rate is input, underneath your product, you will now see the plan's full parameters: date, application rate, minimum rates through to maximum rates, of which these can be manipulated. Generally, manipulation of these rates would suit a liquid product more so than a granular, and is manipulated to the parameters of your nozzles and so that the sprayer can maintain its operating pressure. Looking at this plan, the only real thing left to do is to assign the imagery that we have collected to the plan. So where we can see none, we need to select our desired image from the dates provided. Once happy with your input parameters, click OK. Then click Create. Having created our variable rate nitrogen application plan, in the Nutrition tab we can now see our 4 fields that we assigned the plan to. Subsequently, we can also see that the nitrogen requirement has reduced. This is brilliant throughout the season because it keeps an eye and tracks our inputs so that we know what is left and what potentially might roll over to the next year. So now that we have created our nitrogen application, we need to export it. And to do so, we go to the Data tab. In the Data tab, we click Export. And in the Export, we have some shortcuts that have been pre-populated already. If you haven't already got a shortcut for your terminal, I would urge you to set one up. And quickly, we can do that via the plus, selecting our manufacturer, selecting our terminal, and then clicking Save. Once we've done that, we can click Export Plans on the terminal that we require. In this next screen, we can click on Plan Type, which leads us to select our option of nutrition, because that's where we created our plan. Available plans, in the drop-down box, we need to select our plan that we created. So in this instance, winter wheat, 80 kilograms of nitram. We can now see the variation map that coincides with the NDVI image that we saw earlier on. These rates will tally up with the model that we chose. So effectively what we're doing here is just a sense check to see whether anything is untoward. Now everything looks good to me, so we're looking to go ahead and export. After clicking that export, it brings us back into our shortcut screen. But on the right hand side we can see our plans. This is the plan that we've just exported, and subsequently I need to download it. Click on download and you'll see at the bottom of the screen that your plans will have come in via a zip file.